welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I'm going to be doing my spoiler review discussion of Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. I will warn you right now, it's not going to be a positive review, so if that is going to bother you, then you don't have to watch. Alright, so this is the second book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, the final trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings. We are following mainly Fitz, and we get a couple of chapters from Bee's perspective in this one, which honestly just, there was not enough Bee in this book. She is my favorite character now, and I just wanted the book be all Bee, minimal Fitz. Knew that wasn't going to happen because these books are primarily about Fitz, but like, that's just in my heart what I wanted. So at this point, at the end of the last book, Bee gets kidnapped by the Whites. And so a lot of this book is really just following Fitz as he is trying to, as he finds out that Bee has been kidnapped and is trying to figure out what happened and where she's been taken. So I'm gonna split this kind of into two sections, I think. One is going to be more like specific moments, characters, more specific things, and then the other section is more overall thoughts about the arc of the plot and the place of this in like larger storytelling of the series and all of that. So to start out with some of the more specific events or moments, Fitz gets recognized as Fitz chivalry. I don't think I ever say that out loud. I've only said it in my head. Fitz chivalry Farseer, and he is recognized as a prince. They tell his whole history and recognize him like as a hero, essentially. And that moment, like, I had such conflicting feelings about that happening, because in some ways it was so satisfying for him to finally be recognized for everything that he's done, because he has done so much, he has sacrificed so much, and just to finally like have people actually know everything that he's done and be recognized for that was very satisfying. There is also a part of me that was like, just leave Fitz alone. Like, this, it puts a whole other kind of burden on him to have to now hold this role as a prince, right? There are different kinds of pressures on him, and also bringing him back into being more involved with the Farseers is probably going to get him more involved in their shenanigans. Although, so then throughout the book, we see, one, that Fitz is kind of having trouble adjusting to not being an assassin, but being in this much more public, being more in the public eye and being in his princely role. And then there is where the part where Dutiful is telling him, like, you're not going to be an assassin anymore. You are a prince now. This is not your role. Another thing that I had very conflicting feelings about, because of course I'm like, just let Fitz do his thing. But also I'm like, yeah, just let him not have to be assassin-y. That whole dynamic shift for him of shifting from the anonymity, is that how you pronounce that? For today I'm having problems with pronunciation apparently, but that being more anonymous as Tom Badgerlock had its own kind of freedom to it and kind of allowed him to disengage from the Farseer and political shenanigans. I just had very conflicting feelings about this, because I just was like, I'm glad that he's finally being recognized, but also just like, leave him alone and let him live his life. Another like specific scene that I think was really well done was the morning scene. The scene when they have found Shun or Shine, and Bee has disappeared, and they think that she has died in the stones, and so all of the family like comes together and mourns together. I thought that was like, That was a really good scene. Apparently my favorite scenes in some of these books are like mourning scenes, because in the first book, the scene when when Molly dies and Fitz is like mourning her, also one of my favorite scenes in that book. So I feel like in this series, she's really like, I don't know, those scenes where characters die and people are mourning are just like, just done really well. And I loved how the family really all came together. Now, as for specific characters, I love Perseverance. Like, I also get frustrated with him in situations where I'm like, Perseverance, like, you really should just stay home. Like, stop it. But overall, like, I love him. He lives up to his name. He really just perseveres. But I really love his dedication to B and to Fitz, but I think he's kind of just determined now that he's like, he is dedicated to B primarily, Fitz secondarily. But I really like him, and I really want to see his character like continue to grow. I was very frustrated, I think, with the Fool a lot of times in this book, but I also feel like that may not be fair, because the Fool has been traumatized. He has gone through horrible things that we've only scratched the surface, I think, of what the Fool has been put through. But just the amount that he cannot comprehend that Fitz, his primary focus or loyalty or responsibility is to his child, and that the Fool is insisting that his focus should be on the Fool, was really frustrating to me. And like, another thing that I was like conflicted, because I'm like, I totally understand where the Fool is coming from, both from his perspective of like that he has this greater purpose that he is driving towards, and from the perspective of their personal like relationship that they've had for so long, and because he has been traumatized and Fitz is really the only person that he feels safe with. And so like all of those things make sense. I also was still frustrated with him, because I was like, this is something though that I think has frustrated me about the Fool for a long time. It feels like sometimes he just wants to be the only person in Fitz's life, and that just always like annoys me and kind of rubs me the wrong way about him, and is one of the things that I think always keeps me from like really liking the Fool as a character. And I think it's been there throughout their relationship, but more subtly in previous books, and then it really came more to the forefront in this one. However, I feel like I have to keep caveating this with saying like, I completely understand why the Fool feels the way he does and is acting the way he is based on what he has gone through. It just was also difficult because I'm like, but Fitz has a child that he needs to protect. Like, that is a different situation. Anyway, I had just complicated feelings about their dynamic in this one. All right, so those are some of the more specific things that I had thoughts and feelings about, which actually, now reflecting on them, are more positive. I think my more negative feelings are about the book as a whole, the way that it is telling this story, plotting the story, and pacing it. It's in this like overall storytelling and plotting and pacing that I have some issues with it, because this book was somehow both more plot focused and yet feels like less happened or less was accomplished, because we're really just following Fitz as he is catching up to the point where we as the reader are at, because we know from the end of the first book, beginning of the second book, that Bee was kidnapped by the servants. We're following her perspective. We know what happened at Withy Woods. Like, we know all of this. And so we're just following Fitz as he is slowly piecing all of this together. And his perspective really has the vibe of those Liam Neeson movies where like his daughter gets kidnapped and he's on the phone, he's like, I have a very specific set of skills. Like, it just really gave me those vibes. But that storyline of following Fitz as he is trying to catch up to what we already know, I don't think works very well as a story, and it really isn't great for pacing. And it really makes it feel like very little was accomplished in the story itself. It kind of feels like the story's a little bit circular, because it's like, okay, so I just read 700 pages to end up almost exactly where we started. Like, we moved an inch in the storyline. Now, I don't think that the story should have had Fitz like figure this all out immediately, or have him just like dash off with no information, because those also would have been frustrating as stories. I just think that the story should have focused somewhere else. Like, if I was going to tell this story, I would have put the focus on Bee's perspective for multiple reasons. One of them just being I like Bee better as a character and would much rather follow her. But also I think for plotting and pacing it would make more sense. Like, I would flip the ratio of chapters, because right now it's essentially like for every like 10, 20 page Fitz chapters, there's one like 5-page Bee chapter. And I think that should have been flipped, because we could have followed Bee's perspective and learned more about the servants, followed her through the trials and tribulations of being a captive. I think that some real character development could have been accomplished in that perspective for her. And then we would have every once in a while a briefer chapter to kind of check in with Fitz and see where he was in his progress of figuring out what was going on. And I think that pacing wise that would have made more sense, and like, I don't know, just overall story wise, because then the focus of the story would have been on new experiences, new information, and not on this just following Fitz as he catches up to what we already know. But once again, like as per usual, I think that Robin Hobb and I just have different opinions about how to tell a good story. So just, you know, leave it up to that. That's just how it is. We have differing opinions. I do also feel like the story kind of went on longer than I think it should have. Not even just the like Fitz piecing things together part, but I really felt like the book should have ended after he's like on his way to go after Bee, and he goes through the stone, and Lant and Perseverance show up after him, and they're in that like snowy area. I think it should have ended there. I don't think that it should have continued on into them going into Kelsingra, because that felt like kind of the end of the arc. Like, I felt like the story was over, and then it was like, and then we go to Kelsingra. However, I will say the chapters in Kelsingra were probably like the best part of the book, like the most interesting part. So that maybe makes me a little more optimistic about the third book, because I mean, I'm sure they're not going to spend a long time in Kelsingra, but now that he is actively searching for Bee, or well, no, I guess he's not searching for Bee. He's going to get revenge on the servants because he thinks Bee is dead. So now that he is like actively on a quest or a revenge, like I'm not a big revenge quest person, but at least he's like going somewhere and doing something. Maybe I will like the third book better. While I was reading the second book though, I kept feeling like I don't really understand the purpose of this final trilogy. And this is actually not a question that I have asked myself for any of the previous series, because I feel like each of the previous series or books has felt like in some way it is moving forward the characters, some overall plot, something about the world building. Like, it feels like there was some degree of purpose to them in moving something forward for this series. But this final trilogy, like, I keep trying, it feels like it doesn't have that feeling to me. I don't really understand the purpose of it. It doesn't feel like it's really accomplishing anything in terms of storytelling in the larger scheme of things for the realm of the Elderlings. Maybe that's not the right question to ask, like, what is the purpose of this, or what is the point of this, or how is this moving things forward? Maybe that's not the right question to ask. However, it was something I kept feeling while I was reading this, that it didn't feel like it was really here for a reason, whereas pretty much all of the previous books, I felt like there was some purpose that they had in moving things forward for the world and the characters in the series. And this one feels more stagnant for some reason. Anyway, those are my overall thoughts on Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. I would love to know your thoughts on the book, and I hope that I like the final book. It is like 800 pages, so it's quite a commitment. But yeah, I'm really hoping to end the realm of the Elderlings strong, end it on a high note, so here's hoping. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.